He announced that one evening would cost $200,000. I was floored. For a split second, I just remained there, motionless, holding onto the towel I had wrapped myself in, as if it were my only anchor to reality. Adam, my stepfather, was situated only a short distance from me in the corridor, and his gaze met mine with this repulsive blend of self-assurance and frantic need. It seemed like he had practiced this conversation. Initially, I was too stunned to say anything, but when words finally came out, they erupted as a shout, a combination of incredulity, rage, and utter revulsion. "What in the world is your problem?" I shouted, stepping away as quickly as I could. "I'm Michelle, I'm currently 33 years old, I'm married, I have a couple of kids, and fortunately, I'm a world away from the version of myself that was present there in that hallway." Back then, I was 25, I had just graduated from college, and I was overwhelmed by the debt I accumulated from student loans. I had a job teaching as an assistant professor at a local college, attempting to build a reputation for myself while barely earning enough to cover all my expenses. My father had relocated to another country when I was in my teens, and he had essentially vanished from our existence. Julia, my mom, had married Adam when I turned 20, and to put it mildly, he wasn't the type of individual I would have ever consciously chosen to have in my life. However, my mother was crazy about him, or that's what she tried to make it seem. He was 45 years of age, rich, and gave her everything she ever desired. My mom was a little bit older than Adam. That afternoon was the beginning of everything. I wasn't at my mother's that often because, to be frank, she and I didn't get along all that well. See, Julia, that's my mom, and we just never really clicked, particularly after my twin passed away when we were little girls. But since cash was pretty scarce, I reasoned that crashing at her place for a weekend would save me some money I would spend on food, and perhaps we might even manage to have one good chat for a change. I'd gone for a run earlier that day. It was scorching hot out, and I was completely soaked with perspiration when I got back. I noticed a little message sitting on the kitchen table indicating that Mom was off visiting a friend, and Adam had headed out to get the groceries. Couldn't have been better. I figured I had the whole place to myself for a bit, so I made a beeline for the shower without even bothering to grab any clothes, assuming nobody would be back for at least a few hours. Towel-clad from my shower, I started heading toward the bedroom to grab the clothes I had left there. It never even registered that somebody could have returned sooner than I thought. I mean, why would it? But as soon as I rounded the corner, there he was, Adam, positioned down the hall. My stomach just sank. He was not supposed to be there at that time, and his expression, it just wasn't right. I initially considered that perhaps I had surprised him or maybe he had surprised me. But then that smile, not a typical friendly smile you might get from a stepdad, this was something completely different. Before I could get a word out, he moved in on me. Way too close. "You're gorgeous, did you know that?" he murmured, his voice soft like he was checking to see how I'd react. I was paralyzed, completely unsure of my next move or response. My head was shouting at me to run, to escape the situation, but I felt completely rooted to the spot. And then came the words, the proposition that made me want to throw up. He stated the sum, $200,000 for a single night, as if it were a simple transaction. His manner was even, almost relaxed, as though suggesting something totally typical to his stepdaughter. At that moment, the realization dawned on me. He wasn't kidding around at all, he was serious, every revolting syllable. I felt as if I couldn't breathe properly. My thoughts were spinning wildly, but I couldn't piece together any logical sentence. "What the heck did I just hear you say?" I finally managed to stammer out. My voice was unrecognizable even to myself. It was trembling, practically inaudible. Adam didn't even react. He just stared at me with that awful, smug expression. "You understood me perfectly," he responded, shrugging like it wasn't a major deal. "Give it some thought, Michelle. $200,000. You could wipe out all your debt and begin a new chapter. It could remain our little secret." That's the point when my rage surfaced, rising so quickly that I could physically feel my hands shaking. "Are you out of your mind?" I screamed, stepping back from him. "What do you take me for?" He remained still, showing no sign of shame. In fact, he appeared irritated, as if I was the one being irrational. "Relax," he said, his tone still maddeningly even. "It's just a suggestion." "It's not something to overreact about," he said. Overreact? There he was, attempting to basically purchase me, and he actually had the nerve to tell me to calm down. I was trembling from head to toe, and I couldn't bring myself to look at him at all. I wheeled around and bolted straight to my bedroom, slamming the door shut and securing the lock. After I locked the door, I leaned against it, taking deep breaths, hopping to regain my composure. My heart was beating out of my chest. It was actually painful. I felt cornered, not just within the confines of that room, but by the entire set of circumstances. What action should I take? An urge to shriek, to weep, to hurl an object consumed me. But above all else, I just desperately wanted to be somewhere, anywhere else. And what really stung was realizing I had nobody I could turn to. My mother, she never listened to what I had to say. And what's worse, she dismissed me on any serious issue. And with this, she'd undoubtedly find a way to make it my responsibility, just like she always did. I slumped down on the floor, wrapping my arms around my legs, trying to think of a plan. Every minute felt like an eternity as I sat there wordlessly. Faintly, through the walls, I picked up the droning sound of the television. Adam seemed perfectly at ease in the living room, behaving as if nothing unusual had occurred. That sheer gall made my stomach churn. Then, at last, the sound of the front door unlocking and swinging open punctured the silence. I could make out the sound of my mom's voice, casual and lighthearted as though it were just a typical night. For an instant, a wave of comfort came over me. She was back home. Almost immediately after that, though, a feeling of intense anxiety washed over me. I began to wonder what exactly I should say in this situation. Would she even bother to hear me out? As I fumbled with the lock and pushed the door open, my palms felt sweaty. I saw her putting her handbag on the surface, while Adam was lounging on the sofa as if nothing could bother him. Though my stomach was in knots, I forced myself to speak and managed to get the words out. "Mom, I need to have a conversation with you, just you and me." She rotated her head to look at me, a slight wrinkle appearing on her forehead. "Is something the matter?" she inquired, her voice more irritated than worried. I quickly glanced at Adam, who was observing us as though we were part of some entertainment. I despised his relaxed demeanor, as if he already knew the ending to this whole situation. I used my hand to indicate the kitchen area, trying to make my voice sound firm. "Can we please just have this discussion where no one can hear us?" With a sigh, my mom headed into the kitchen after me. As I stood there, pressing myself against the counter, I could feel my hands shaking, trying to figure out how to phrase everything correctly. "Mom," I began, my voice catching in my throat. "Adam made a proposition to me." Something utterly revolting. The expression on her face changed, but not in the way I was hoping it would. Instead of displaying concern, she appeared irritated. "What is it that you're even talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp and direct. I inhaled deeply, feeling as though I was about to fall into the abyss. He presented me with an offer of money, specifically $200,000 if I would sleep with him. The words felt like a corrosive substance as they left my mouth. I anticipated a reaction of shock, or perhaps rage, or something along those lines. But the reaction I received instead caused my heart to sink. Her face tightened and a harsh chuckle escaped her lips. "Seriously, Michelle, get a grip." I was just standing there, totally speechless, looking at her. "I'm telling the truth," I insisted, my voice getting louder. "He actually said those words not long ago, right there in the hall," but she wasn't paying any attention. She was already moving her head back and forth in disapproval, her lips twisting into a scornful look. "You are just impossible," she told me. "I should have anticipated you doing something along these lines." Always craving the spotlight, always stirring up drama, I couldn't believe she was saying this. My own mother writing me off as if I was some kind of troublemaker inventing stories. I could feel tears starting to gather, but I wasn't going to let them spill over. "I'm not making this up," I said again, even louder now, with my voice trembling. She lifted her hand as if to silence me, her face completely emotionless. "That's enough, Michelle. We'll just have to hear what Adam has to say." She marched back into the living room and I trailed behind her, my heart racing. Adam glanced up from the sofa like we'd just ruined his peace and quiet. "Adam," my mom said sharply, with an angry tone in her voice. "Michelle is telling me that you apparently said something totally out of line to her. She's saying you offered her money for." She paused briefly, shooting a frosty look in my direction. "For you know what?" She made a suggestive face, obviously uncomfortable actually saying the words. Adam shifted in his seat, his face taking on this overly dramatic, worried look, almost like he was the victim here. I'm struggling to find the right words, Julia, but it's actually the reverse of what she's alleging, he explained, shaking his head like the very idea was absurd. As I remember it, she walked out of the bathroom wearing just a towel, and well, it struck me as though she wanted me to notice her. He briefly looked my way, putting on this fake expression of sympathy. I didn't want to say anything because I really didn't want to make you upset, but now she's completely changing the story. My mouth fell open in disbelief. What? I yelled, my voice cracking as I moved closer. That's not how it went down, and you're fully aware of that. But Adam remained collected, raising his hands as if to protect himself. Honestly, Julia, I was ready to just ignore it because I didn't believe it was worth the drama, but I can't just stand by while she makes these claims. He seemed so level-headed, even rational, which just made me so angry. I looked over at my mom, really hoping she could see through his deception, but the way she was looking just made me feel sick to my stomach. She wasn't focused on him at all, she was staring daggers at me. My mom didn't speak right away, but the look she gave me spoke volumes. She was taking his side. Of course she would. I can't believe this, she said quietly, shaking her head. You come into my home and you behave like this? How could you, Michelle? Her words felt like a physical blow. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks, and my whole body was shaking from how mad and annoyed I was. Are you really taking his side? I asked in a shout, my voice all shaky. He's not telling the truth, Mom. He's straight up lying to you, but she wouldn't listen to me. She faced Adam and put her hand on his shoulder as if he was the one suffering. I'm so sorry you had to put up with this, was what she said, her voice just oozing sympathy. That was the last straw. I couldn't stand being in that house for even one more second. I spun around and rushed toward the entrance, my hands shaking as I picked up my bag. You know what? Just forget it, I said with a quiver in my voice. You can believe whatever you like, but I'm out of here. I didn't even pause to hear what she'd say. Instead, I just left, my eyes getting all blurry from tears as I grabbed my belongings and headed to the front door. I could hardly breathe, the feeling of being betrayed and the anger crushing me inside. Right as I got to the door, I heard her speak up from behind me, her voice hard and without warmth. I never expected much from you, Michelle, but I never imagined you were a. That's where she stopped. I turned back quickly, still gripping the doorknob tightly. Don't even think about it, I said, my voice quiet but trembling with fury. I could feel my eyes burning as I glared at her, feeling all the pain and betrayal just overflowing inside me. You want to believe him? All right, but you better never call me that word. She just stood there with her arms folded, her face all hard and cold, and for a split second I thought she was actually going to say it. But she didn't end up saying it. Instead, she turned away from me like I didn't even matter. I pushed the door open, went out, and gave it a forceful slam behind me. The tears were threatening to well up again, but I wouldn't let her catch me crying. None of them were going to see me like that, not her, not Adam, nobody in that place. I practically sprinted to my car, tossed my purse onto the seat beside me, and got in, clutching the steering wheel until my hands were bone white. For a few minutes, I drove without any real destination in mind, the streets an indistinct haze through my watery eyes. I just couldn't contain all of the rage and shame. Ultimately, I found a spot on the shoulder of the road, brought the car to a halt, and released all of my pent-up emotions. Gripping the wheel, I was shaken by uncontrollable weeping as the full burden of everything overwhelmed me. Eventually, I used my sleeve to wipe my face, trying to get my breath under control, but that tight feeling in my chest just wouldn't release. I really needed to confide in someone, it didn't even matter who, but I was drawing a blank on who to contact. I couldn't call my mom, and there was absolutely no way I'd talk to someone who might turn this into a juicy story. Then, John popped into my head. At that point, he was simply a reliable and trusted friend. For a split second, I felt foolish and ashamed about what happened, but I needed to unload this before it destroyed me. With shaky fingers, I grabbed my phone and punched in his number. It kept ringing for a few moments before he picked up, and his voice was so level and recognizable. Michelle, is everything all right? He asked, immediately picking up that something was amiss. Hearing his voice was enough to set the waterworks off again. John, I managed to croak out. I really needed someone to listen. Could I just explain what went down? I steeled myself for whatever he might say, unsure if he'd look down on me or think I was blowing things out of proportion, but honestly I was past caring. I simply had to get this off my chest. Back then, John and I were nothing more than pals. Decent pals, for sure, but there wasn't anything romantic between us. We crossed paths at the local college where I was employed. He struck me as someone who was approachable and down-to-earth, the type of person who'd tell a joke to break the tension or lend an ear when you really needed one. We'd gotten coffee together a few times over the past months, and I consistently felt at ease around him. He never pressured me, never passed judgment. Just a genuine, reliable friend. That's the explanation for why, despite the fact I was feeling exposed and vulnerable, I called his number. He was among the small number of people who I was confident would hear me out without distorting things or causing me to feel even worse. As I waited for him to pick up, a part of me was concerned that I was putting too much on his plate, but the instant he answered, I was certain I'd done the right thing. I have a feeling my tone of voice clued him in that I needed to leave my house and have a real conversation with someone who wouldn't belittle me. Even though I was still struggling to regain composure, I drove over there, my hands shaking noticeably on the wheel. Upon arriving, I noticed him on a bench beneath a large oak, his typical relaxed demeanor swapped out for a look of subdued worry. As I got closer, he stood up and offered me a gentle smile. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" I shook my head, biting my lip in an attempt to stop myself from falling apart again. We took a seat on the bench, and for a while I just gazed at the ground, searching for the right things to say. Eventually, I inhaled deeply and recounted everything to him, the details about Adam, his repulsive proposition, and the fact that my mom not only didn't trust my version, but somehow managed to blame me. The words rushed out of me, and I experienced a blend of anger and release, as if I was finally unloading a burden I'd been carrying throughout the entire night. Once I was done speaking, I lifted my gaze to John, almost anticipating that he'd have the same skeptical look my mom gave me. However, his face reflected a silent rage. It wasn't directed toward me, but at what happened at Adam himself. "Michelle," he stated with conviction, his voice unwavering. "I believe you. I believe every single thing you've told me." Hearing him say that felt like I was standing on solid ground for the first time in hours, even if it was only briefly. I exhaled unsteadily, and tears welled up once more, but this time they weren't brought on by sadness, but instead by an overwhelming sense of relief. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice hardly above a whisper. He gave a shake of his head, his jaw muscles clenching. "This isn't something you should be going through, because of what he did. It's just sickening, and your mother, she definitely should be supporting you, without a doubt." His words felt like they were soothing a painful injury. I didn't feel utterly isolated, not for the first time today. I inhaled deeply, attempting to organize my thoughts, but everything just spilled out of me before I could control it. "You see, it's more than just this one thing," I began, my voice shaky. "Speaking of my mom, she's always been distant towards me, especially after Lily." I stopped for a second, swallowing hard, ever since the death of my sister when I was 7 and we were at the park. She was chasing a ball and she ran into the road, and then my voice faded off as the memory washed over me intensely. The sound of the tires screeching, the yelling, it all flooded back. John didn't speak, he just nodded, letting me express everything. "It was a complete accident," I went on, my voice breaking slightly. "But it seems as if my mom never saw it that way at all. Everything became different after that day. She quit looking at me with the same affection, no more hugs, she just cut me off completely. And now, tonight, it's as if she's blaming me again, like I'm the one at fault, like I did something wrong. I don't even know why I had the thought that she would believe me." Tears started to fall down my face, and I quickly wiped them away, feeling ashamed at how much I was falling apart. The next several days ran together in a haze of anger, pain, and restless nights. I just couldn't get rid of the image of Adam's self-satisfied look, the way he distorted everything to make it seem like I was the person at fault. And my mother, the automatic way she backed him up stung more profoundly than I anticipated. Yet, the more I dwelled on the situation, the more apparent it became that I couldn't simply ignore this. I just couldn't allow him to proceed unchecked, especially since I possessed the real story. I was in need of verification, confirmation, some sort of evidence that my mother couldn't easily dismiss. Something that would ultimately compel her to acknowledge his true nature. The solution occurred to me one evening as I was lying in bed, eyes fixed on the roof, mentally replaying all the events. My mobile device. I could utilize my cell phone for recording his words. It was uncomplicated, and I was always in possession of it. The thought itself caused my heart to race faster. If I managed to get Adam to repeat what he'd expressed, or even imply something related, I would at long last possess tangible evidence. A piece of proof my mom couldn't simply ignore or reinterpret in her favor. My conclusion was that the most effective method for surprising Adam would be for me to participate in his game, giving him the impression that I was reevaluating my stance. The very thought of it made me feel ill, but I recognized that this constituted the exclusive path toward extracting his confession. That night, I gave him a call, maintaining a stable tone in my voice as though I were honestly torn. Adam, I said, employing a somewhat wavering inflection, I've been considering the events of the other day. Perhaps we should convene in a secluded setting for a conversation. I have the impression that possibly we misinterpreted one another's meaning. A moment of silence occurred on his end, and I ceased breathing, anticipating his reaction. After some time, he eventually spoke, saying that he was happy I was being sensible about the matter, Michelle. He then asked where I wanted us to get together. That subtly arrogant tone was present in his voice again, the one that always gave me the creeps, but I did my best to remain composed. There's a park not too far from here, I offered as a suggestion. It's a peaceful place, so we shouldn't have anyone interfering with our conversation. He consented without a second thought, and after ending the call, I immediately opened the voice recording function on my phone. I practiced what I planned to say, making an effort to keep my temper under wraps. This was the opportunity I had to reveal his true colors, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. The moment I noticed Adam making his way over to the bench where I was sitting, I quietly began the recording on my phone, making sure it remained concealed inside the pocket of my jacket. Although my palms were sweaty, I told myself to maintain a sense of calm. It was crucial for me to make this seem authentic. I stood up as he got closer, manufacturing a small, uneasy smile. "Hey, Adam," I greeted him, keeping my voice gentle. "Thanks for agreeing to come here to talk. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what took place, and I wanted to say I was sorry if I had misinterpreted something." He flashed a smile, wearing that same infuriatingly self-satisfied look he always had when he believed he had the upper hand. "I appreciate you saying that, Michelle," he replied as he sat down on the bench next to me. "I was sure that you would eventually see things my way. You know, sometimes our feelings can get the best of us." I gave a nod, acting like I was in agreement with him. "Yeah, it's possible I might have blown things out of proportion. I mean, I was definitely taken by surprise, and I probably didn't respond in the best way possible." I stopped for a moment, taking a quick look at him. "I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. What exactly were you implying with your comment? Regarding the finances?" He seemed to be evaluating how much information to reveal, his face changing a little. "Okay," he started, moving closer. "I'm only mentioning it because I believed there was a certain level of agreement between us. You are an intelligent and attractive woman, Michelle. I was hoping you could recognize the potential benefit in the situation." I tried to keep calm, making sure my voice didn't waver. "But $200,000, that's a substantial sum of money, Adam. What made you even think to propose such a thing? What was it you wanted from me?" He gave a small laugh and shook his head a bit. "Honestly, I wasn't really looking for anything. I was just kind of seeing where you stood to see if you might be open to the idea. You're having a hard time, right? I thought it could be a win-win scenario." My stomach churned a little, but I tried not to show it. "A win-win how exactly?" I asked, my voice controlled and low. He leaned back against the bench, a smirk forming on his face. "Come on, Michelle, let's be real here. You understand completely what I was getting at. I didn't think you would react this strongly." It's not as though anyone else had to find out about it. I gave a slow nod, allowing a pause to stretch out before I spoke again. "So you actually meant what you said about the $200,000? He just shrugged, acting like it was no big deal. "Yeah, of course, I stand by what I say, Michelle. I assumed you would be thankful for the offer." His every utterance just infuriated me, but I kept my cool because I was aware that the recorder was capturing all of it. I cast one final gaze upon him, my tone gentle but steady. "I appreciate you explaining that, Adam. Hearing it straight from you was a necessity for me." I mustered a weak smile, glancing down at my hands as if feeling ashamed. You know, you're not entirely incorrect, Adam, I uttered in a subdued and uncertain voice. I'm having difficulties, my finances have been strained, and honestly, with my debts, most days I've been feeling like I'm sinking. I looked at him, noticing a subtle spark of thrill in his gaze as he edged a little nearer. That's nothing you need to feel guilty about, he remarked, his voice becoming gentler in a way that almost sounded sympathetic, but I wasn't fooled. Michelle, you're an intelligent person. You have possibilities open to you, and I'm giving you an opportunity that might turn your life around. It's not solely a question of finances, it's a question of simplifying our lives together. I gave a gradual nod, acting as though I were considering the proposition. It's just, I'm not sure. This is new territory for me, I've never contemplated anything resembling this. I mean, it's not as if you're unpleasant to look at or anything, I threw in, faking a jittery giggle as if I were ashamed to acknowledge it. Actually, Adam, you're rather attractive. His grin grew wider and he straightened his posture, definitely emboldened. Well, thanks, he responded, his voice taking on a more self-assured quality. You see, this doesn't need to be uncomfortable. I knew you'd come to see things my way in the end. Maybe it could turn out well for the both of us, Michelle. You just have to allow yourself to view it that way. I checked him out again, pretending to be unsure. You might be right about that. I think I just need some time to consider things, I mentioned as I gradually rose to my feet. Could I get back to you within a couple of days? I just need to fully process everything. He agreed with an expansive grin that spread across his face. There's no rush, take all the time you require. I'm happy we were able to discuss this. I gave him a slight smile as I nodded, then turned and started walking away, with my phone still recording everything in my pocket. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from nerves anymore. I had finally trapped him. Every vile and sickening thing he said had been recorded, and I was perfectly clear on what I intended to do next. A couple of days later, I placed a call to Adam. My stomach was twisting in knots as I entered his number, but I told myself that this was all part of the scheme. He answered after only a couple of rings, sounding impatient, as if he was awaiting my call. Michelle, he said in a silky voice, I was hoping you'd call. Have you had a chance to consider my proposition? I paused for a moment to make it seem like I had, and then said, yeah, I've been giving it a lot of thought and I'm prepared to discuss it further. But I'd prefer to meet in a discreet place, somewhere secluded. I could hear the thrill in his voice when he responded, absolutely, just tell me where and when. I had already selected the place we would meet, a high-end hotel downtown that Adam and my mother frequently boast about. All right, Grand Regent, I mentioned, suggesting that we connect in the hotel entrance around 8 this evening, that way we could iron out the specifics. He didn't pause for even a second before concurring without reservation. He said everything was ideal and that he'd see me this evening. After I disconnected the call, I leaned back and inhaled deeply. All the necessary arrangements were complete. The battery in my phone was at 100%, and I had already configured the recording application for simple one-touch activation. Adam was going to be under the impression that he had the upper hand this evening, though this time I wasn't going to come away with nothing. At 10 to 8, I telephoned Adam, keeping my tone steady while adding a touch of urgency. I explained to him that I was behind schedule. The road congestion is awful. Why not go ahead and await my arrival in a hotel suite? I'll be there to meet you the moment I have the opportunity. He didn't pause, evidently impatient. It's not a problem, Michelle. I'll inform the front desk staff that you're expected. After ending the conversation, I made a beeline for my mother's place, squeezing the steering wheel with so much force that my fingers went pale. The moment she unlocked and opened the entrance, her expression was filled with distrust. Her voice was accusatory when she inquired what I was looking for. I didn't bother with formalities. I stated resolutely that she was accompanying me. She tried to raise objections, but I ceased her protests, my voice controlled but saturated with feeling. Unless she accompanied me at that instant, I assured her she would have no contact with me in the future. No calls, no visits, nothing at all. This was her sole opportunity. She reacted with surprise, and after a stressful period, she secured her handbag and tailed me to the vehicle. Upon pulling up to the hotel, I was aware that my heartbeat was accelerated, though I succeeded in staying calm. My mom was sitting rigidly in the passenger seat, her arms were folded, and she wasn't saying anything. I found a spot to park, then I guided her in through the hotel's impressive entryway. The atmosphere reeked of well-maintained wood and recently arranged bouquets, which was exactly the kind of opulence that Adam and my mom enjoyed showing off. I made my way directly over to the front desk, making sure I kept my tone even but assertive. "Excuse me, I'm supposed to meet someone here, but I'm not sure which room it is. I was told to provide my name to you all here." I gave the receptionist my name. She acknowledged it with a nod, typing away at her computer before picking up the phone to double-check. "Room 704, on the 7th floor," she confirmed. I faced my mom, extending the keycard toward her. "Okay, let's go," I said, keeping my voice even. She didn't answer, but she did follow me into the elevator. The trip upwards felt incredibly drawn out. After we got to the right floor, I inhaled deeply before swiping the card through the door's reader. I heard the lock click open, and I pushed the door inward. Adam was relaxing in an armchair, appearing way too at ease. He glanced up, clearly thinking it was just me, but his face immediately shifted when he noticed my mom standing right behind me. His smile faded a little, and he leaped to his feet. "What's happening?" he wondered, his tone more curt than normal, his self-assurance suddenly diminishing. I walked into the room, with my mom right behind me. As he looked back and forth between us, Adam's face was a jumble of puzzlement and alarm. "Michelle, what is happening?" he questioned, although he was struggling to maintain composure, the strain evident in his tone. I took out my cell phone, clutching it securely. "I figured it was time to get that particular issue resolved once and for all, Adam," I stated, my tone icy. "You haven't forgotten, have you? The discussion we had at the park just 48 hours earlier." His gaze jumped towards my mother, then swiftly returned to me. "Michelle, I have no idea what you're referring to," he responded rapidly, his characteristic arrogance giving way to noticeable anxiety. "I believe you're seriously misinterpreting things." I offered a small smile, my hand shaking just a bit as I pressed the play button on my device. His voice reverberated through the space, incredibly distinct. Every vile thing he'd uttered at the park echoed, including his propositions, his justifications, and, worst of all, his offhand acknowledgement that he stood by everything he'd said. My mother's face lost its color as the recording went on. She became motionless, her eyes opened wide as she looked intently at Adam. When the recording came to an end, I looked at my mom, my voice firm but filled with feeling. "That's the guy you stood up for, the one you decided to trust more than me. So tell me now, Mom, am I still the one telling lies in this situation?" Adam began to stutter, his face flushed with terror. "Julia, you have to understand this is all being misrepresented. She tricked me," he blurted out, his voice becoming louder in desperation. "I swear you won't believe it, she was just trying to make you dislike me." But my mother didn't glance at him. Her eyes were locked on me, her lips parted slightly as if she was struggling to speak. Eventually, in a hushed tone, she questioned if what she was hearing was true, addressing me by name. Her voice was so quiet, yet the break in it was impossible to miss. My mother and I didn't have much of a conversation during the trip back to the house, but things were different somehow. It was as if, for once in my life, she truly saw me for who I was. 7 days later, she started the process of legally separating from my stepfather, and Adam was permanently removed from our family. She never laid eyes on him after that day, and I didn't either. In the following weeks, my mom and I began to communicate more openly, and gradually our connection began to improve. She said she was sorry, a real heartfelt apology, for not taking my side and for the way she had acted towards me throughout the years. It wasn't an immediate solution, but it was a beginning. For the first time, I felt like I was not just the replacement for the daughter she used to have and no longer did. I was also her own daughter, and she desired my presence in her world. Thinking about that time, that evening altered the course of everything. It made me advocate for myself in a manner I never had before. It was difficult, agonizing, and complicated, but it also gave me my voice and my life again. My mom shows me consideration now, and although we won't ever be without flaws, we've created a path to keep going. As for my situation, experiencing all of that brought John and me into a deeper relationship. He stuck by my side through every stage, touching base with me, backing me up, and always believing my story. What began as a platonic connection evolved into something deeper as time passed. As I hit the big 30, we had already tied the knot, And now, with Bobby and Emma in the picture, I finally have the family I always longed for. It's a family founded upon love and mutual respect, which is something I never imagined I'd actually experience.